Am I being judgmental or am I discerning? The distinction between these two ways of evaluating the world is something that is often lost in our society. There is such a fear of being judgmental. And, that's valid. That's something that we want to be evaluating in ourselves. But that great fear of being seen as judgmental is keeping many of us from discerning what is truly right for us versus what is not. So let's look at the differences. Judgment is based on a more dualistic system. In general, if you're judging, there's going to be an idea that it's good or bad, these kind of binary terms where you're not going to be seeing the nuance as much. It's often going to come out of a place of ego and fear and your own personal biases. So if you find yourself kind of being like, oh, that person, it's probably judgment. Then discernment is a little bit, it can feel like that at times. And it can also, at its core, the piece to not miss out on is that discernment is more of a just seeing what is. So frequently people want to be in denial about certain aspects of a person or situation. And it's very normal. We have confirmation biases that come from our first impressions, our second impressions, and it can be very difficult to look outside of that confirmation bias when dealing with a person or situation, whether we initially perceived that person or situation in a positive light or a negative light. We are going to be using that past data to project the future. We are going to have a confirmation bias that's going to be more likely to see in the present what we saw in the past. So discernment is a beautiful skill that can come in and help us in this time, because discernment is just pulling that back, moving out of that default thinking of, just being in the projection of, well, this person always did this, so this must be an anomaly that they're acting in this way. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. And, the thing is, of course, it is a good idea to give the benefit of the doubt. Of course, it's a good idea to look at multiple reasons that a person might be doing something. And if it's somebody that you have a connection with, to find ways to work through the conflict, to find ways to do some reality testing about what their intentions were, what the outcome is, all of that. I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm saying we need to see discernment as what it truly is, which is an aspect of our humanness that keep us safe and keep us on the right path for us. So discernment is moving out of that dualistic right, wrong, binary system and more into that non-dual place of being able to see a person as a spectrum or a situation as a spectrum, where there can be pieces coexisting that don't necessarily feel cohesive or congruent, yet we aren't throwing one of those data points out because it doesn't fit. So it can be really hard. Like, how do you hold all of these pieces of a person within this scope? Our mind wants to create schemas, and that exists for people and situations, places where we want to have kind of a more concise understanding of it. And that serves us in allowing us to move through life in that type of default, rather than everything being like a whole new situation where we need to take in every part anew. We have things encoded within our minds for what we might expect from that type of behavior or whatever. But when we pull that back and we allow ourselves to just experience the person for what they are being, and it's very freeing, because it is allowing yourself to see a person in their full humanity. And the flip side is that it can often be very triggering to people to be seen in that way. People want you to just give them the benefit of the doubt over and over and over and not see their darkness. But it is, in a way, it's honoring that human, it's honoring humanity, that we do have all of these different parts. And although our human mind and heart can struggle to hold them all, it's something that we want to continue to work towards, to expand our ability to hold dissonant pieces without needing to disqualify outliers, allowing a person to have a moment that was kind of strange and not just say, oh, they didn't mean it, but say perhaps that is a part of them that is coming from some other aspect of them that I am not as familiar with. And, that can be okay. A thing I see a lot is people kind of get afraid to allow themselves to see less favorable aspects of a person or situation, because they're afraid that if they do see it, that's going to mean they're going to have to cut that person out completely. And so that is using that dualistic mindset to try to understand discernment. And that's going to create a blockage, because discernment is not about in or out, right or wrong. It's about just seeing what's there. And the reality is, sometimes when you have had enough experiences with somebody and you're allowing there to be a full spectrum of data points, beautiful things, not so beautiful things, you might choose that person is not somebody who you want to allow to be close to you. And there's various ways that we want to interact with people, but would we rather ignore those parts of a person and have them close, even though they aren't somebody that we, when we're using our full ability to discern, would trust with that level of our, more intimate, vulnerable parts? So it doesn't mean that the person has to be completely outcast, but maybe you can see that they're not a person who on their path is in alignment with some of the aspects of your path that you are holding in highest value. We all are discerning and ascending in different ways. You might have figured this thing out, and I didn't get that yet, but I figured this thing out. This is where my value-based actions are. This is where your value-based actions are. This is where my ego-based actions are still kicking around, and where your ego-based actions are still kicking around. And it's all fine. We're all on the path and doing our thing. But I might discern that this person, group, place, whatever, is not actually the type of mirror I'd like to have for myself at this point in time. Because the reality is, the people that we surround ourselves with, the situations that we put ourselves in, are going to affect us. I mean, what's that saying? It's like you become the people you surround yourself with, or something. And I mean, it sounds kind of cheesy, and it's, not always, it's not quite that cut and dry and dualistic way of seeing things. But the reality is that the people that we allow into our vulnerability are going to affect us. They're going to, hearing their opinions, hearing their thoughts, is going to affect us if we are in an open place and, truly present with them. And that can be an amazing thing, or that can be a not so great thing. But the ability to discern is going to help us to decide how much we want to allow ourselves to be affected by people based on the data points they have given us. Not just based on the confirmation bias of our friend told us that this is a good thing, or our first impression was good, but rather the full spectrum of data points allow us to discern from a place of truly loving ourselves and loving others, seeing others for all that they are, and not just people pleasing them or trying to make them feel safe, but first taking care of ourselves. And from that place of love and abundance, trusting that we can support the journeys of other people, and perhaps they might even learn a thing or two about discernment from the ways that we're working with it in ourselves. So I hope this was helpful. A topic that's just been so relevant to me in recent times, and I think it's becoming more and more relevant to people as people are waking up to be able to see with more clarity what's happening in the world, what's happening in the people and amongst us, and figuring out how to use that skill and integrate it into a more embodied sense of the type of person that we are becoming.